Hi, and welcome to this special podcast episode on careers in industry. With careers in academia becoming harder and harder to get, and with the number of opportunities in industry rising, more and more graduates are considering and getting stellar positions in industry. My fellow public scholar Tanya and I reached out to 3 Concordia alumni and asked them about their decision to start their careers in industry, what skills they felt were most critical, and what advice they had for anyone looking to do the same. Here's what they had to say. My name is Alexa. I'm a 4th-year psychology student doing my PhD at Concordia. I'm studying now decision-making across the lifespan, specifically looking at what the neural mechanisms are that support different decision-making strategies and how this changes across the lifespan in accordance with how our brain changes as we age from childhood through young adulthood into older adulthood.
I'm Tanya. I'm in the John Wilson School of Business at Concordia, and I study the consequences of consumer choice deferral. And deferral is basically putting off decisions. So in our daily lives, we often put off a lot of buying decisions, and I basically look at the consequences, both psychological and behavioral, of these deferrals.
I'm Elizabeth Morin-Lessard. I am a quantitative UX or user experience researcher at Heyday AI by Hootsuite. So I work in tech at the moment, and my role is essentially to use all the information, data, everything we know, or gather everything we can about our users to be able to know how we can improve not only their experience, but also our products and what we offer to them. I have a PhD in psychology from Concordia University, and at Concordia I studied bilingualism and language. And so I studied everything from development to also our cognition and how people learn language.
I'm currently a senior behavioral scientist at market research and brand strategy consultancy based in Toronto. My work looks at income inequality and its role on status and luxury consumption, how need for affiliation and cultural norms, as well as types of luxury products, can all be impacted mostly by income inequality, and why income inequality itself, and not just having money or not having money, but the inequality is what often drives status and luxury consumption and leads to what we call bad consumer debt.
My name is Mot, and I studied electrical engineering and computer science at Concordia for my PhD. And my background is in machine learning. And now I work in a company, AI-based company. It is mostly about research. I'm a senior machine learning researcher now.
And it's really interesting to hear how different backgrounds like psychology, marketing, kind of both led you to similar paths. Did you feel like it was a sudden decision to pursue a job in industry, or was it something you always kind of thought of throughout the completion of your graduate studies, be at the master level or PhD level?
It was definitely gradual. I always thought I'd have a career in academia for some reason. Why? I don't know, but I always thought I liked the lure of it, whatever it was. I really thought I was going to stay in academia. I actually switched to marketing after my undergrad, switched to business school for different reasons, but I realized that there was a world out there outside of academia that I never really explored. I was in middle of my third year in the PhD. I think it was the third year. Yeah, I was reached out to by a headhunter. I played around with my LinkedIn a bit, just out of curiosity, see what's out there. I think I was really just having the idea kind of go through my head, and a headhunter reached out to me. And the headhunter, we connected, we chatted for a while. I said I wasn't really considering it, but I maybe would consider an internship. All that to say, it led to a very interesting internship that summer. During my internship, I think that's where the decision kind of happened. It definitely wasn't a sudden decision. It was gradual, but it happened during that internship. I decided to take on a part-time research analyst kind of role after my internship. I got busier with my industry work, and over time, I did more industry work than academic work. And I mean, I always stayed focused on my research after hours or whatever it was. But I think I just started realizing that there was a lot in industry that I never gave credit for. I always thought I might be bored, or, I won't have the same impact or whatever. But I found that I was having a lot of impact in industry as well. And I wasn't bored, and I was always doing different things.
Yes, I would say for me as well, it was really gradual as a process. So right after my PhD, I went into a postdoc. So I went to do a postdoc. I was kind of like going for academia, kind of going that route. And I did about 2.5 years of a postdoc. And for me, when I think it started, I started to think more about really whether that was a good fit for me was during, I mean, the worldwide pandemic happened. So we all had to stay home. We all had to think about what we really, about life and what we were doing, I guess. And for me, it really kind of precipitated those kind of thoughts about, is this what I really want to do and all that? And I mean, up until January 2020, I interviewed for a tenure track position at a university. And so I was still, very much considering academia. But then I think what, the time that the pandemic afforded to me was to think more about whether that was a good fit for my goals, my career goals, kind of what I want out of life. And so that's kind of when I started to consider an industry position, not I guess on an equal footing as academia. It's kind of something that became more realistic and something that I could see myself doing.
Actually, personally, I think the very first thing that I thought back then, I realized that it's difficult to get a academic position. It is very difficult because it is really, really competitive. And so I decided to switch to industry because it is way easier to get a job in industry. And the other factor was that in academia, actually in engineering, we do research, but lots of our research doesn't have that much application in real world. We just do research and it's all on paper, it is theory, and we don't do much practical stuff and it cannot be implemented in real world, so it doesn't have a real application. I really like to walk on the edge of technology and do something, create something that I can see the result of my research at the hand of people. I want to see that works in real world applications. And this was the motivation for me to join industry.
How did you find out about the current opportunity that you're currently at? So was it something that was advertised? Did you have any prior connection at the company? Or did you do a paid/unpaid internship, which I think is true in Haim's case?
So for me, it was when I started applying really broadly to kind of different UX positions all over, the US, the UK, everywhere. I think we were all kind of also stuck at home. So I was kind of willing to go anywhere at that point. And so I started interviewing at some of these companies for quantitative UX roles. And then as I was moving along through the interview process, I started realizing, wait a minute, I'm not sure if I'd actually enjoy doing this. I think I would, but it's a big kind of career move. And so I wasn't too sure about that. And then that's when I was spending a lot of time on LinkedIn. And at the time I saw one of my contacts in my network from years ago, who is a co-founder essentially of the company I work at now, that was talking a lot about conversational AI, conversations, so all the things that I do now at the company. But at the time I didn't, fully make the connection. But suddenly I realized, wait a minute, I have a background in psychology of language. Conversational AI kind of makes sense. And so I reached out to this contact and asked, listen, I'd be willing to do some pro bono research work for you. I still have a job full time, but, here and there, I'd be very happy to do research for you in exchange for me to get, I would get experience in the field in UX and in tech. And in return, then you would get, some insights or data for your company. So I got connected to my current manager, and then I started working with them kind of part-time pro bono. And eventually they offered me a part-time contract. And then a few weeks later, they created this tailor-made position for me, essentially full-time. And so that's how I got my current position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a very interesting story. Actually, PhD students or postdoc students are the connection. It is just one way of this connection. The PhD or postdoc students are a connection between academia and industry, and from industry they can bring money or opportunities to academia. It is just one way. It is what happened to me. previous student of my supervisor introduced some opportunities to my supervisor, and my supervisor introduced me as an intern to the company. And yeah.
So I basically wanted to ask, so were there any skills that you felt you were lacking when you sort of entered the internship that you had to develop more to sort of, like ease this transition or facilitate the transition, like that, skills that maybe you were not taught during the PhD, or skills that you were taught during the PhD that you found to be useful? So just like, maybe talk about both sides of the coin.
That's a good question. I definitely strengthened my programming, like my Python skills in industry. I don't know if that was something I did beforehand or just on the job. I was always somewhat comfortable with Python, always pretty comfortable with R, even before I kind of went out to industry. But I think those are things that are very valued. I guess things like that are definitely things that I focused on improving while in industry. But I think those are things wherever you come from. If you come from an undergrad that's not fully like data science driven, and you're going to have to learn those things, it's some of those skills you're going to have to pick up on the job. I don't know, unless you're looking for a data science role specifically, I don't know if it's absolutely necessary to develop those skills before you even start looking for a job. But I think over time, many of the jobs that people leaving academia, leaving the PhD programs to go to industry are going to require some of those skills at some point.
And so to answer your question about the skills, I do think that PhDs, and I think maybe we don't fully realize, but we do have all the skills that it takes to work in industry. That's kind of something that at first, like, I think we all have this kind of imposter syndrome of, wait, do I have the skills and can I do this? And I think the answer is yes, but it's more about how to reframe them so that employers and people in industry know what we can offer. And I think sometimes people are not clear also about what we can offer, but I think there's so many things we can offer that we don't realize. And so in terms of skills, it's communication skills. So presentation skills, we have a lot of those. Networking, going to conferences and networking and speaking with people you don't know and asking them questions. So doing research is something we're really good at. So Chaim said, it's kind of reaching out to people that you don't know for informational interviews, kind of asking them questions. So I did a lot of that, kind of going on LinkedIn, typing PhD, UX research, and then search for everyone who kind of fit that profile. And I reached out to all of these people for, quick 15, 30-minute coffee chats over Zoom, which is something we are all used to doing now during, the pandemic. So I'd say that the skills that will be the most important to you in the transition is doing research.
You definitely have the skills, and I think it's a reframing. The academic CV to the industry CV is just a matter of reframing the type of skills and the type of tools. But it's the skills are there.
So we talked a bit about the skills that you learned during your PhD that were transferable to your industry position. I'd just like you to elaborate on how did you go about translating those skills on your CV so that they were interpretable by industry recruiters?
I leveraged friends, really. Honestly, I leveraged friends already in industry. I had them read my CV, edit it over, edit it multiple times. Friends, friends who've been in industry since undergrad have been around in industry for a while, and they have more senior positions already. So getting their advice on what they're looking for when they're getting CVs and things like that was, just being humble and listening to them and really listening. Yes, I might have the PhD, but they have the industry experience and the industry knowledge. Stay humble, take their advice, and listen to them. But I personally didn't use Concordia. I probably should have in retrospect, but I had a lot of friends doing well in industry. So staying humble, listening to them, and really going to them for feedback all the time.
So for me, I networked with a lot of people who were in industry. So again, all of the informational interviews, I reached out to over 45 people, whenever I had time off. Over my lunch break, I would have a little coffee chat. I would speak with those people, and a lot of them who were coming from academia, who had PhDs, were very generous of their time and kind of to share their knowledge and help out with giving feedback on my CV and things like that. And so that was a big one also. So again, like Chaim said, the network, the friends who give you feedback, people who are already there, who know the language to use and to kind of maybe help reframe some of these things based on their experience and knowledge of the field. That was very helpful.
personally, I've tried to, get some training from different platforms. Concordia has an agreement, I think, with MyTax, and I followed a really great training by MyTax, which kind of broke everything down. So kind of like taking or listing, like I said before, these skills that are very academic and translating or taking out of them what would be a transferable skill. And that was really, really helpful for me. And that's kind of like one thing that I would really recommend to anyone listening to this is trying to think about, well, what are the skills you've developed and how do you frame them in your academic mindset? And then how do you take out what are the transferable skills in those or translate the terms into something more transferable? But something else I've heard, and I've heard it in both directions, is on the one hand, be humble. So, you have a PhD, but you don't really, you're not ready to take that senior position right away, or you're not ready to sell yourself as this, know-it-all necessarily in a field that's completely different from the one you've lived in for so long. On the other hand, I've also heard you have to sell yourself. You have to show the skills you have. So I was curious to see that, we talked about, I heard you both say humble and you have to be humble. And is that really what you experienced? Like, did you have to tone down how you were selling yourself or did you have to upsell? And what was it like for you?
They're not mutually exclusive. You can sell yourself and still be humble. One thing you have to recognize is you spent 7 years or so in academia, probably more than many of your colleagues. And you're coming in, you're probably at a position where you might be older than some because you don't have, for me personally, necessarily the skills to manage a whole team. Don't necessarily have managed the full P&L yet. So I think on some level, right, you want to take a management level position, but you probably don't have all the skills for a management level position. You will probably get to that management level position a lot faster than most. My personal experience was I had to sell myself, but I also had to stay humble. Sell myself and what my skills were, recognize what my skills weren't, and know that taking a job that was slightly perhaps under what I might be able to handle would set me up for success with my company in a much better way than if I jumped on the most senior level position I could have grabbed from them. Probably set myself up not as well for success.
That's a really great answer. Elizabeth, do you see it the same way?
I do, yeah. And I think it's also, it's a good reminder of that, we are very specialized in an area and we know our stuff very well as a PhD and we have a ton of skills, but that doesn't make us, doesn't mean that we know everything, right? And so especially if you come from a field like me in psychology and you go into business, there's a lot of just even the business terms and the business way of doing things that is very different from what I'm used to. So just learning that there's going to be a learning curve initially, but in no time you'll learn, but it's just a matter of kind of selling yourself, yes, and saying what you bring to the table confidently, that's fine, but also being very honest and, saying that, well, you know what, I don't know about all these things, but I'm someone who can learn pretty well and I can do research and I can look things up and look up articles and Google things. I'm really good at doing that. And so I can learn very quickly. So I think being honest with that is also something that employers would value and appreciate.
So have you thought about returning to academia? And what are your thoughts? We'd be really interested to know about what your thoughts are on that subject.
So, for going back to academia, I would say I'm not closing that door fully in terms of maybe teaching positions in the future, but I would say that for now, that's not necessarily something that I would be doing necessarily, or that I would want to be doing. There are things, of course, about academia that I really enjoyed that I think, in a way, at first initially, I thought I would miss, but a lot of them are kind of brought up into my role and are things that I do into my current role. For example, one of the things that I thought I was going to miss was doing the kind of more research work, kind of, reading articles, discussing these new ideas for research. But actually, it turns out that I work with really, really smart people in my field. And there's a lot of people who have masters as well and people who do work in AI. So I'm working on, the AI team, working on new models that we're working on for conversational AI. And so we have to read articles about that. And so I find that I get that aspect as well in my work. And so for people who are, so Chaim earlier said something about being bored and, or being scared of being bored. I'm never bored in my work either. So I still do a lot of that kind of research and get that research aspect in my work. And so I think that for now, I'm quite content with my work in industry, but I am open to maybe in the future, going back to maybe teach a course based on my new knowledge of the field. But Yeah.
In terms of coming back to academia and things that I miss, I still teach. I still teach. I like teaching. Yeah, I always kind of leave the door open a little bit with partnerships as well. I keep connections with people in academia, but I don't think I'm ever going to fully leave industry. Like, I don't see a full real academic position for me ever coming back. Like, I just don't think, to be honest, I don't think that's what I want anymore. But I do enjoy teaching. I do enjoy the partnerships, and I do enjoy the intellectual stimulation that I get sometimes just talking with colleagues in academia. And I try to keep those doors open as much as I can.
I really love your answers. I think it's really in line with what direction I see both fields moving in. It's kind of more of an integration. It's not kind of so much like, okay, you've reached the split in the road and you have to decide, and this is it, and you close the other door and it's never going back. But things are starting to move in a direction where it's not so much one or the other, but it's like, well, what do I want? Maybe I want to teach. Maybe I want to also work in industry and have this kind of nice marriage of the two together. And I think the field or the environment is moving in that direction. It's really nice to see that that's how people are going into. It's not just things are happening in that direction. That's also what people want. And it's really nice to think that you don't have to close the other door.
So obviously, making this transition into the industry is a daunting prospect, right? And so how did you feel during this process? And if you'd like to share, how did you overcome feelings, negative feelings that you may have had during this process?
After many years of being in academia for my undergrad, for my master, for my PhD, lots of years, many years in academia, I have to start a new life, which is looking for a job, and it is not academia. This transition was really difficult. So I think what is more scary, what was more scary for me, what was more frightening for me was that transition and that transition in life. But if I want to answer the question about whether I miss anything in academia, I would say my work is still pretty much as research, and it is not much different. So there is nothing to miss. Yeah.
Again, I think it's scary initially to make that decision because of what you hear. It's like, oh no, you can never go back, or oh, maybe you'll be bored. And you even hear from sometimes employers are scared of hiring PhDs because they might get bored. And so there's always this kind of fear of well, is this something that I'd like to do? What if I get bored and then I can't go back? And but for me, what really helped was networking with people who did the switch, right? So kind of people who have PhDs who now work in industry, and hearing from them, who all seemed very happy with their lives, very happy with their decision. They had more of a, you want maybe more of a work-life balance. I know that's something that's a lot of people really value, and you can see that they had their evenings and weekends back, and that's something they really appreciated. So I think it depends again on your values and what you're looking for the next step. But I think talking to people who have done the switch was really helpful and to kind of reassuring in a way, right? Because we all had those they probably all had those same fears initially, and so. That was really helpful to talk to people who've done the switch and who have gone through that transition.
I want to thank you again and talking with us and sharing your experiences, and for your candor and for your honesty, especially, for being so open about and transparent about the process. I think people who listen to this will definitely appreciate that. And, we wish you the best of luck in all your future endeavors. And, I think Alexa and I are also sort of nearing that point in our PhD lives where we're sort of maybe, contemplating these decisions. And so I can say that at least personally, this conversation has been really enlightening and insightful. And I hope the same for everybody who listens to this conversation. So yeah, thank you again for joining us.